Everyone, thank you for joining us once again in a new episode of our People Power Health Insight series. Today we have a new guest, our dear friend Robert Rock. And instead of introducing him, I will ask Robert if you are coming down and you find a room full of new people that you haven't met before, how could you introduce yourself in that room?
Um, I would say, hi, my name's Robert. I'm a family physician, uh, physician educator, well, interprofessional health professional educator, organizer, and like misfit for social justice and health justice.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you, Robert. And first of all, let's start with a little bit about your story. So, where are you from? How did you grew up, and how did you get into the medicine and the healthcare world?
Yeah. Originally from New York, born and raised in Queens. My healthcare story starts with my parents. So they came to the United States in the late 70s, early 80s from Haiti, fleeing a dictatorship. Grew up they first settled in Brooklyn. Actually lived with my grandaunt, my grandmother's sister, helped them like get on their feet, helped them find housing, etc. Had my brother, then came to Queens, and I was born. And like growing up was great. My dad was a livery cab driver. My mother was and still is a seamstress. And I I had a really enjoyable upbringing. I think things started to sensitize me to, just health inequalities and the injustices in the world. As I, got older and went to high school and went to college and was lucky enough to get scholarships to some schools that I otherwise wouldn't be able to afford. But it really showed me just how differently people can live, even though they live relatively close to each other and live their lives in such close proximity. I think the socioeconomic strata in New York City are just so stark. And you can move in one space, like crisscrossing the city, and not really appreciate it until you're given access to it. And education was very much that access for me. So I think, in my teens, I started to get sensitized and become aware that there are differences in terms of, people's health, people's access, people's potential. But it's really started to crystallize when my grandaunt, the one who, helped my parents get on their feet in New York, got sick. So needless to say, she was the matriarch of the family. She had done what she did for my parents, for many others, and was the type to, take everything on herself, but not really share her problem with other people. And she had a strong distrust for Western medicine. And so my junior year of high school, she finally shared with family members that she was having like really bad abdominal pain and was bleeding. Um, and when she said that, we took it extremely seriously because she had never admitted anything as a cough up until that point. But it was a real struggle to get her access. She lived in East New York, Brooklyn. Um, it took a while for her to be seen, and eventually she was diagnosed with uterine cancer. And so it was just a very trying ordeal in that this woman who I had only known as strong, struggling to be seen, struggling to be cared for after having given so much care to others, um, just not understanding like why is this so hard when someone's asking for help in this fundamental way. Why is it so hard for her to get the help she needs? So it took a while, but she finally got care and was plugged into the system. And then it was another ordeal in terms of appointment after scan after scan. And she never learned English. So there was definitely a language barrier, but I think the thing that she perceived most was the cultural barrier, in terms of taking a back seat to her own health and not being made to feel like she's in control, that she has an active say. And it came to a point, she just really got tired of it, and she decided to forego care. So the summer after my junior year, we watched her like slowly get weaker and thinner and eventually pass. And up until that point, I was actually really interested in the arts. I wanted to be a designer, kind of like following my mom's footsteps, be maybe like a fashion designer. But at that point, like I knew I want to play the role better in the lives of others than it was played in my family. And so from then on, I was set. I want to use medicine as a means of social justice. And I want to make a material difference in, communities like the one that I grew up in. And so really changed what I focused on in high school, started to take, AP classes in the sciences and things like that. Went to college, knew that I wanted to go into med school, and learned that I didn't need to major in science to go into a med school, which I think was a real blessing. It allowed me to focus on the humanities and really start gaining exposure to questions that when I got to medical school weren't being asked. And so since then, it's been an active fight at every stage of my medical training to have an education that is accountable to the realities of this country, that'll actually prepare me to be the clinician that my future patients deserve.
Wow. No, thank you for that, Robert. And one of the things that I would like to ask you next is, once you decided that medicine was the way that you're going to walk through, and you decided which school and everything, those first moments, those first months, those first years in medical school, how did you feel when you entered into that world of the medical education in this country?
I felt extremely unseen and to a point unwelcomed, in that my interests were extracurricular. They weren't considered, hardcore science. And so I remember struggling a lot in my first semester, particularly, knowing what I came into med school for, not seeing it reflected in the curriculum, simultaneously taking on leadership roles in SNMA, LMSA, being the community service liaison, et cetera, taking me into community that felt very much like the one that I grew up in, and being reminded that it's not just New York, it's here too, it's all over the country. And you can't, once you see it, you can't unsee it. But in class, it felt like there was a concerted omission or obfuscation of the context in terms of the epidemiological data that we're like going over, in terms of like this group is susceptible to hypertension, et cetera, more than others. Like teaching race is like a biological phenomenon in a way that is like ahistorical, apolitical, and does not really wrestle with power and understanding illness is a manifestation of societal oppression. And so, it took a lot of time, and honestly, a quality group of peers who felt the same way to make me feel empowered enough not to wait. And so that's really when my foray into health professional education, really as a form of community organizing, started, and I've never looked back.
No. I completely feel that part, because I also remember when I got into medical school in the first semester, feeling that disconnection between what I wanted to do, and the reason I got into medical school and what was being taught in the curriculum in the classes. And you mentioned a very important word here: your peers, your colleagues, your friends. And I know that you had very specific project. I don't know if it was the first project or there were other projects around that one, that was involved with some of your colleagues and that you developed in school. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So you mean the U.S. Health Justice course? Yes. So, like I said, first semester, it was disorienting to say the least. And I had one classmate who I had met during second weekend. Her name's Tareem Rahman, who's similarly committed to using medicine as a means to social justice. And we essentially found each other and commiserated over the entire course of that first semester. Just like, is it going to get better? She was really interested in global health and frustrated with the fact that they taught it as if the United States wasn't on the globe. I was very dissatisfied with the lack of context and domestic health inequalities. And so, we kind of compared notes. This is what I'm hearing. This is a potential place for people that have these interests. Turned out that it's not, et cetera, et cetera. And those conversations turned into us really dreaming and imagining better. Like, there has to be better out there. And I think it was by February, we had made the decision, February of our first year, that better is not going to happen if we don't make it for ourselves. And that's when we really start to set out that we're going to make a curriculum that will teach all of these things that we know to be incredibly important, that just aren't there. And I would say our relationship was the nucleus for creating the community that really birthed the health justice course.
Amazing. And in these years since the health justice course started, what have you heard from people that have gone through it, and what have the learnings been in them?
So honestly, it has been the energy that we put into creating the course and all of the people who have passed through it after have essentially been pouring that love back into me over time. And I've met the most amazing kindred spirits from different walks of life and different, professions through it. Um, and it's made me feel that we've succeeded, one, in creating a space for people who have felt extremely othered in both their identities and their passions and their interests. For them to feel seen, to feel safe, to feel supported, that they are not crazy. And so that's the first thing. It has continued to serve as a safe haven for people within, the biomedical educational model to recognize and assert and affirm that context matters. And then from there, I think it's been really incredible in that it's been able to facilitate the fostering of relationships across institutions within the university and outside of institutions at the university. So the health justice course was originally designed for PA students, med students, and advanced practice nursing students at Yale University. And the course lasts a semester, and the educators come from all walks of life. We have some health professionals, we have lawyers come in, we have community activists come in, and we really emphasize self-determination on the part of what the community and different leaders in the community have been able to create for themselves to really push back against that savior narrative that kind of gets put into your back when you put the white coat on. And I would say that the relationships and the discussions that happen and develop within that course have helped people to take the course plug into community that much faster than they would otherwise, to find mentors, to find safe havens among the faculty and among the New Haven community. And so more than anything, I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful that, for the fewer students who take on leadership in, passing on the torch and being student leaders, because, we hand it off every year. It's wonderful to see them come into themselves and come into their voice when medical training can often silence you and make you feel like you don't know anything relative to what medicine or nursing or physician associate education has to teach you.
Amazing. Now, we have talked a little bit about how it started and some of the first projects and work that you did in medical school. But more recently, we met in a national conference, in a national summit that was organized by the Social Mission Alliance. Mm-hmm. And I know that you also play a very key and important role in SMA. So I was wondering, could you please share with us a little bit more about that work?
Yeah. So I am the fellowship director for the Health Justice Fellowship within the Social Mission Alliance. And essentially, it is dedicated to supporting those students who felt like me in my first and second year of medical school, dedicated to showing them that they're not crazy, but also providing them with the resources, the skills, and the network to go that much further than they would otherwise go if they had to reinvent the wheel in any way. And so it's a year-long fellowship it's virtual, and it's open to dental students, medical students, PA students, nursing students, and public health students. And we take 6 fellows a year, and there is a curriculum of guest seminar facilitators. We have hands-on one-on-one mentoring. We do like op-ed writing workshops. We have media training workshops in terms of interviewing. And we really try to support them in realizing, the dream that they share with us on the application. And it is a wonderful feeling to be able to pay it forward in terms of sharing what I've learned in my experience with them, so they can take it that much further and, learn things through them in terms of the amazing work that they're doing, and also expand this space for belonging and safety and subversion, honestly, to be larger than any single institution and larger than any particular time, because often, in med school, at least 4-year cycles, and then it's a completely different playing field in terms of who the students are. And so being able to create a line of knowledge sharing, skills and tactics exchange, I think is extremely invaluable. And to have it housed within the Social Mission Alliance that's so committed to really pushing institutions to do better by educating a healthcare workforce that's ready to, meet the needs that, our country is struggling from, and to do the health professional education process in a way that is immediately impactful and beneficial to the communities that, host these large academic centers.
Exactly. And it was recently announced that next year's national conference, it's happening in April.
Yes. Yes, at the Duke School of Nursing.
Exactly. And we are already preparing to be there and to meet again with these amazing people that each year come to the Social Mission Alliance conference. Mm-hmm. And one last question, Robert, before we move towards the end of the interview. If you had, I know that you already had the opportunity of speaking in front of directors of medical schools, nursing schools, etc. But if there's one of these directors or deans or someone that is watching this interview, and and they are struggling maybe inside of their institution about how to introduce health justice into their curriculum, what would you say? What would you tell them?
I would tell them to look closely in the immediate periphery of your institution because health justice is already happening. It's not a mistake that, a lot of our country's premier large academic medical centers are smack in the middle of urban, underserved, majority, minority communities, and that these communities are often struggling with or struggling against the systematic oppression that these large academic centers can perpetuate. I would say, look there. It's not that far, and a lot of times it's a matter of facilitation, less than you needing to create everything from the ground up. And I've designed a few curricula since I started medical school, and the thing that I've learned is that humility is so crucial to allowing things that are better than you could have ever imagined to happen. So yeah, that'll be my advice.
Okay, last two questions before we finish this interview, Robert. The first one, if you had the opportunity of meeting for a cup of coffee, a cup of tea with any person, dead or alive, from across the history of the world, who will you choose to meet?
Um, at this juncture of my life, I would say Ella Baker.
Okay.
Um, I've read, her biographies. I've read some of her speeches, and the way that she led her life, with this unifying purpose that cut across various, civil rights organizations and formations, and have, played a crucial role in creating community, in facilitating agency across spectrums of age, across spectrums of class. Um, that's a conversation that I would love to have, to sit down and really learn from her what her how she navigated that, what her North Star was in
Okay.
her own words. Um, yeah, that would be a wonderful conversation to have. So I would say Ella Baker.
Amazing. And last question, is there any book, movie, or some kind of media that you would recommend people to watch, to read, so that they can get inspired as they decide to work and to do um, community organizing on the healthcare arena?
An oldie but a goodie. I would always go back to Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. Um, Read that book multiple times now at this point in my life, and every time I go back, a different passage resonates in a different way. And I think if if you're going to read one thing and you're interested about using education as a aspect of organizing, and I feel like they're one and the same, um, it's an incredible book to read. So yeah, that'll be my recommendation.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you again, Robert, for this opportunity of meeting and having this amazing conversation. It's always inspiring to have these moments and to talk to you. And to everyone that is following up this interview, thank you for joining us again, and see you soon.